Welcome to An Unconventional Life, a podcast where we share stories about the crazy 1% out there who earned their doctoral degrees and then went on to use them in crazy, cool, unique, and unconventional ways. Here's your host, astrophysicist turned teacher, author, dissertation coach, and more, Dr. Russell Strickland.
Hello and welcome. This is Dr. Russell Strickland, and I'm your host for An Unconventional Life podcast. Today I have with me Dr. Jasmine Escalera, and she is a confidence coach. She came up through the so-called hard sciences, studying chemistry and biochemistry, got her Ph.D. in pharmacology from Yale, and since receiving her Ph.D., she's gone on to high-level management positions within hospitals and nonprofits, helping to design programs for increasing quality of life and providing healthcare options to underserved populations. So I want to welcome you, Dr. Escalera, to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. I cannot wait to talk about my PhD story.
Well, I want to let everybody know that today's episode is brought to you by Dissertation Done. At Dissertation Done, we help adult doctoral students through the dissertation process. So whether you are see that dissertation in the horizon and want to go ahead and proactively begin to start your planning process now, or if you're in the midst of the tumult right now and you'd like a little bit of help to right the ship, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/done. That's dissertationdone.com/done. We'll talk to you, see if you might be a good fit for our Fast Track Your Dissertation coaching program. And if you're already on the other side of the dissertation, and you maybe want to be functioning in that expert space as a coach or a counselor, consultant, something like that, the best way to get your message out there is by becoming a published author. And so when you have a doctoral degree, your first name's doctor, and you literally write the book on your area of expertise, you become the go-to expert for anyone. So if you'd like to find out about becoming a published author, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/book. And we can talk to you about our Expand Your Authority book program. Again, Dr. Escalera, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited.
So I actually started off my academic career, my academic training in sort of the hard sciences as well. I was in physics.
Ooh, physics gives me anxiety.
Well, I forgot who it was. There was a guy who won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. He had a quote that the only real science is physics and everything else is stamp collecting. I want to say it was Linus Pauling, I believe.
Ooh.
But we like to throw that in his face.
Those are fighting words.
Yeah, they are. But I think what he was talking about is physics is really built on fundamentals, and chemistry is abstraction, where you take 10 to the 23rd physics problems and handle them at one time, and that's chemistry. And then you start handling a bunch of chemistry problems at the same time. You get biology, and you go up from there.
Yeah.
So, things like medicine and pharmacology, and then we can continue abstracting on up to psychology and sociology and all of those things. So just a little bit of my kind of nerd creds going back to when that was my day-to-day life. But let me ask you, coming up through those ranks, what made you decide to pursue your PhD? It's not a decision that most people make by far, and those who do make have to often struggle with it. So what brought you to that point and decided to pursue a PhD in pharmacology?
Yeah, so I had a love for science and for chemistry ever since high school. I can remember being in high school and my chemistry teacher on our first day of, general chemistry class started mixing some stuff together and creating colors and smoke. And I don't know, like something about that was so cool. Like I wanted to know how you can mix things together to create something completely different. And that's where my love for science really started. And so I got my bachelor's in biochemistry. And once I was, on my way to being done with that, I had such a great experience doing research. I had such a great experience in the sciences. And at that point, not dating myself, but this was quite a while ago, it was either you become a doctor, meaning you do an MD, or you become a doctor, meaning you get a PhD. There really weren't many other options. So I actually decided I was going to try to do both. So I took my MCAT, I applied to some medical schools, but that just didn't really feel authentic to me because I loved kind of like getting into the science, really being hands-on in a different way. And I love designing research projects. Like that was my thing. I really love that first point of like, what question is it that we're trying to answer, and how do we actually answer that question? So I decided to do pharmacology because I was really, really interested in drug design. I was very interested in how you can actually create something that is ingested by the body that then creates change. So I decided to go the pharmacology route, thinking that I was actually going to go into the pharmaceutical industry. So my main objective when finishing was, I want to get my pharmacology degree. I want to work for Johnson and Johnson, and I'm going to be the boss of Johnson and Johnson Pharmaceuticals one day. Like that was like my dream. That was my path. So that was the journey that I thought I would be on. Huh?
Not going for small, big pharma.
No, I was not going for small. I don't ever go for small. That's the thing.
Yeah. I mean, when you mentioned that initial love of science, I'll have to say, I did mention that my degrees were in physics, but my first real touch point with science was probably my chemistry teacher in high school as well.
Yeah.
He was one of the smartest folks in the school. And we did organic chemistry in high school, which was kind of insane, but
Wow, that is insane. I
that's
didn't
kind of
do
what he was
organic chemistry until college, and I have to say I really enjoyed organic chemistry, but that was a tough one for my class.
Yeah. But I mean, we got to do things in that class where we were, actually breaking down foods and things like that. So
Oh,
not just,
amazing.
yeah, in chemistry class, we did do the colors and like the heat and all that kind of stuff. But then we got to in organic chemistry some really cool stuff. I mean, we were doing um, cholesterol tests, from first principles
Wow.
in
That's
class.
awesome.
It was really cool. I really I do remember that fondly. So okay, so you decided, that the path was sort of obvious for you,
Mm-hmm.
as you mentioned, because it was kind of what was laid out, and that's kind of true for a lot of folks who take what I call a traditional path through the
Mm-hmm.
process. Tell us about your dissertation process. What was that like after you finished all of your courses, and then it was time to go out and do this big research project?
Yeah, so my dissertation process, I mean, I loved doing the research for my dissertation. My dissertation is actually looking at sensory neural pain channels and really thinking about different pharmacological agents that could block those sensory neural pain channels and the effects that it had. So it was really interesting because I got to do research that I was greatly interested in. I got to work even with pharmaceutical companies to test some of their initial products, both in animals and also just at the bench. And so I had a great time doing my dissertation. But what I really realized was that hard science actually takes you very far away from the person and the people. So I grew up, and just a little background on me, I grew up in the projects in Brooklyn, New York, and I grew up around individuals where I got to see that there's just a dearth of resources. There's no resources out there for this community. And it was a community that I, of course, felt so incredibly connected to because my community was my champion. Like everyone in my community, every time I got an A, it was like I would come home and, I'd see the fellas on the stoop and I'd be like, I got my A in chemistry. And they would be so excited. So I felt like while I was doing my dissertation, I was almost kind of moving away from my general initial purpose. Was like I wanted to be able to see change in people. I wanted to be able to be a little bit more boots on the ground. So during the process of my dissertation, I actually felt like I started to get a little bit lost in a way. And I was, again, not dating myself, but when I was in graduate school, it was like, if you are doing your PhD, again, you only have two options. You're going to go into academia or you're going to go into the pharmaceutical industry. And at that point, like those two options just didn't feel genuine to me. They didn't connect to me at all. So I actually felt really lost during my dissertation. Although I was doing work I loved, I had no idea what I wanted that next step to be, because that initial idea of going to the pharmaceutical industry, be the director of drug development, like that just didn't seem right to me anymore. So I actually had to do a lot of deep reflection, a lot of deep soul searching. I connected to a lot of alumni. I went to Yale, so a lot of alumni, to see what are other people doing with these degrees, because I want to do something different. And that's really how I stumbled upon, working for nonprofit organizations, which has been a love of mine for the last 10 years, but really using research, using science to help these nonprofit organizations design programs and think about clinical studies that could actually help populations in need around healthcare. Specifically, I got into the mental health space, children's mental health.
So I want to, and I want to talk more about that soon, but tell me, how did this sort of unanchored feeling, this sort of lost feeling that you mentioned during your dissertation, how did that affect that work? Do you feel like that cost you any time, or do you feel like you were able to stay focused on the dissertation work while still doing the other thing of researching and trying to project your future path?
There was a moment where I definitely, I mean, to be completely transparent, there was a moment where I actually wanted to leave my PhD. I remember going to Yale Career Services and I felt so lost, and I knew that like this wasn't what I wanted to do long term. This, this bench science, it wasn't what I wanted. So I went to Career Services, and I remember having this conversation with someone who worked there saying like, I feel completely lost. This isn't for me. I really think I'm going to leave. And, her response back to me was one that I remember to this day, which is like, it doesn't have to be this or that, and your job in your career and your job in your life is to find your path. So it doesn't have to be A or B. So this was the second point in my life where I thought I only had two paths to walk, but I had to find the third option. So it did affect me in that, my mind wasn't 100% in it when I was really wavering. But once I started to figure out what I wanted to do, then I got really excited to leave. Then I was like, okay, let's get this done and let's get out of here. So
That's exactly right. So when you were talking a little earlier, I was definitely going to head towards that idea of so many options are available. This doctoral degree just opens up so many options. Not many people have it. It's a very highly desired commodity in the marketplace, and there are so many ways that you can leverage it. You really do get to write your ticket. You just have to be open-minded enough to listen for the knocks on the door. Expect them sometimes coming from the window.
Yeah, the window, the chimney, like weird places.
It's an opportunity necessarily, but it's there. It's there.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that this person in the career counseling was able to help you with that, because for a lot of folks, or a lot of career counseling, you see people thinking, okay, I got to walk her off the ledge. She came in here to be a pharmacologist. That's what we're going to get her to do. But we just have to get her back on the path. And that's not really going to be the right answer for everyone. And so to have someone tell you that you had these options, I'm sure was really helpful to you, because like you said, at some point there was a light bulb, and then all of a sudden you were really motivated to go ahead and finish up and graduate.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And I do have to say that she explained that to me, which was an eye-opener. And the second thing she said to me was truth, which is a PhD is never going to close a door for you, right? And I think that was amazing for me to also hear, which was like, stick this out. And I do have to say that so many opportunities have come to me because of that degree. And also a lot of opportunities have come to me because people see that I have a degree in something and am doing something different. So they're just kind of naturally interested in like, oh, you didn't go the traditional path. Like, how did you do that?
Well, that's certainly the first thing I wanted to mention for folks that are listening is, here is yet another person that at some point struggled with a little bit of a crisis of identity. And I don't know exactly what I want to be doing. And it caused a little bit of friction and some doubt in the doctoral degree program, to the point of thinking, maybe I want to leave. Maybe I don't want to finish this. This is so normal. We see this all the time. And if you are struggling, because so many of the folks that are listening don't have the benefit of the campus community that you were part of. So many people are doing this, at nights and weekends and stuff like that, while they're working full time, while they're raising their family and paying the bills and all the other things that you have to do as an adult. And so if you're in that situation, understand that you're not alone in struggling through this process and in having some difficulties. It's almost like it's a step that the university forgot to put into the template, that and here is where you struggle, here's where you have your crisis of conscience, and here's where you decide you're going to quit, and then here's where you decide you're not going to quit, and so forth. It's so typical, so normal for folks who get into these degree programs to have these kind of struggles. And here's just another example of that, with success on the other side. And that's where I want to go to next, is because, like you said, there were lots of opportunities that came knocking from the door and the window and the chimney and
everywhere.
tell us a little bit about that. Some of the things that presented themselves to you after you got out there and finished your doctoral degree and got out there in the marketplace.
Yeah, so once I actually finished my PhD, I felt like I was actually moving into a path that I really didn't know too much about. I wanted to do research operations, design research programs, research project management, but like I didn't have a project management degree. I didn't really know the sort of kinks of all of that. So, in terms of presenting itself, having that PhD, I remember the first job I got as a research project manager at the Department of Veteran Affairs in Boston. I remember during the interview specifically, I was, very green. And I said, I'm not a project manager. I don't know how, like, I know that there are certifications for this, but like, I don't have that. And I remember the gentleman that was interviewing me said, you got a PhD, that means you can do pretty much anything. And that was so true. So since having my PhD, really the opportunities that have arisen have been massive, and me being able to sort of have that background that I can actually do anything. I can figure anything out. If you can figure out how to make how to make your study work when it's not working, like you can do pretty much anything. And so the possibilities have really been massive. It's been me being able to acquire positions without specific certifications because I really can say to them, I can do this. It's been me having the opportunity to do presentations, to go around the country and talk, to be on podcasts, to be able to really explore different opportunities that I just don't think would have been there had I not gone through that experience. That experience taught me a lot about science. It taught me a lot about a lot of different things, but what it also taught me about was resilience. Like there were so many times when I was just like, to hell with this, I'm done. And I stuck with it. And I think in essence, your PhD will teach you resilience more than anything else.
And well, one of the things that we talked about a lot on the podcast is that probably the number one skill for the PhD or doctoral degrees in general engender is learning how to learn. If you haven't gotten to the point where you're really good at learning by the time you get into your doctoral degree, you will get to that point before you successfully finish, because it's so much that you have to take in, so much that you have to understand. You have to be able to be critical and separate the wheat from the chaff. It's a huge benefit to people. And when you said that you're able to go in and get a position without a certification, like the guy said, PhD says that you are certified.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we have to really realize that and own that. Like at that time, I hadn't thought about it. And he was actually in the process of getting a PhD while working full time. And I think he understood completely how much getting a PhD really does, shape you as a person, shape you as an intellectual. And so he was just like, I'm more than sure you're going to be able to do this.
Do you have any stories about, I mean, that was one in a sense, but do you have any stories about how people treated you differently? Like, were you ever surprised at the way someone treated you when they knew your first name was Doctor?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So I actually have been afflicted by imposter syndrome my entire academic and career. So
I never have to say that word, and it comes up almost every time we talk.
I'm sure it does, because it runs rampant in the academic setting. And I personally believe that in the academic setting, we just don't talk about it enough. It needs to be talked about more. But so I had imposter syndrome for a very long time. And it's only until a few years ago that I feel like I started to take charge of it. And I started to really own it in a way where I was trying to overcome it. And so for a very long time, I did not actually want to use that title, but that was because of myself. That was because of my internal feelings. So when people would introduce me as doctor, being a Latina, being a brown woman, I think that people did take pause with that. But because they also took pause with that, I took pause with it. So there were a lot of those kinds of feelings of, do I really want to use this title? Because I didn't necessarily want to own every single one of my accomplishments. I will say that when people introduced me with that title, or when I did use that title, there's a different air in the room. Like it changes the way people look at you because you have gone through the trenches. They know, like even people who haven't experienced getting a PhD recognize that doing it is very difficult and that there's only a select group of individuals who can really put their all into something like that. So it does change the shape of the dynamic of a room. I can also remember,
Because
yeah.
the thing is that most people don't understand, they don't get it, what's really going on.
Mm-hmm.
And there becomes almost, for a lot of people, I would say there's almost this deification. You're no longer a person, you're a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think a lot of the imposter syndrome comes from, because you know who you are, your family knows who you are. It's just the new people that you meet
Mm-hmm.
that treat you so differently. So
Yeah.
yeah, I do see that a lot, and that's something that we have to be aware of, how other people are going to treat us, and also what other people will expect of us, because
Mm-hmm.
other people will expect that you literally know everything, because there's a lot of people that don't understand that that's not even possible. They just think that, you're a doctor, you must know everything, and so you have to be careful when you're talking to them, about sticking to the things that you know, because they'll take everything you say as gospel, or whatever would be their analogy to that.
I wish my significant other thought of me like that. Like he just
Well,
took
again,
every word that I said as gospel. That would be amazing.
you had to wait to meet him until after you graduated. That was the problem. Shouldn't have done it before.
Oh man.
But so tell us, again, some of these opportunities that came knocking. What have you been able to do now that you have this degree?
Yeah, so I think in terms of what I've been able to really do and what I've been able to accomplish, some of my greatest accomplishments since getting my PhD have really been being able to take charge and ownership in a way that is very different from other individuals. There is a core level of belief in the things that I can accomplish and do. And so for various organizations that I've worked for, I've been able to be granted a level of power and status at the organization and at the role within the role that I'm in that I truly believe other people would not be granted because of that that degree and because of the things that I've been able to accomplish. And so for me, within my different positions, I've had the ability to really take projects, design projects, and promote and put out projects into the world that are really wonderful opportunities for an organization and for myself to be able to give back to different communities around healthcare and healthcare access and healthcare inequities. So I've just really had the opportunity to use my science and my research background to design projects in a different way than I think other individuals would design them, because I look at it from the lens of how can we create the most impact? What is it that we actually want to change? And how do we want to move the needle? And I think that's really what research and doing research gives to you, is it gives you the opportunity to ask really insightful questions, but then to think about what you want the end goal to be, and then to be able to really think about how you're going to analyze that along the way, which I think is incredibly different. And it really gives you the opportunity to design projects, design research in a completely different capacity.
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned people as being something that was a real motivating factor for you, and that
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to step away from the bench because you wanted to get closer to people. How has the work that you've been doing, how have you seen that impact communities? Uh,
Yeah. Such a great question. So, I worked for an organization called the Child Mind Institute, fantastic organization. It's a children's mental health organization. And there I had the opportunity to come in when they had an idea. They said, we want to create this research program where we will be giving free mental health and learning evaluations to kids in the New York City community in an effort to collect data to really be able to see what's a better way to diagnose children's mental health disorders. And they gave me this challenge of like, here's the idea, here's the concept, and we really want you to come up with how to design the actual program. And that was an amazing opportunity to design a project where we're giving free resources to kids all throughout New York City. And I had the opportunity to open up different locations to actually be able to give these evaluations to kids. I worked within these locations. So not only was I designing the project, I was supervising the staff, and I had the opportunity to see directly how this project was impacting families. And these were families where, these kinds of evaluations cost thousands of dollars. When you talk about a learning evaluation for a child, thousands of dollars families are spending. And these were families that just did not have the resources to do that. So I got the opportunity to really create a program where I was giving away for every single family thousands of dollars worth of free care to their child. And that was the most remarkable thing that I've ever done in my entire career, because not only seeing how it impacts the family or impacts the child, but knowing that you have the opportunity to design it from scratch. Someone just gave you an idea and said, roll with it, figure it out, do it all. And that was just like such an amazing accomplishment for me. I used my research background, I used my design background, but I used my love for community first.
Yeah. That is awesome. I will tell you, that's another theme that we hear from so many of our doctoral students, is that the reason why, the motivation, the mission, so to speak, is all about helping make the world a better place somehow. Whether it's working directly with people. So for some folks, it's managing processes, and it's a little bit more disconnected. But for so many folks, it's about reaching out and making things better for whether it's giving back or whatever. And that's why I find it so interesting to work with folks who have their doctoral degrees or who are in the process of earning their doctoral degrees. Just this intense motivation to make the world better is so inspirational. I know that you at some point were given an opportunity to give a TED Talk. How did that come about?
Actually, it came about from Dr. Lisa Orbe-Austin, who I believe was on your podcast as well. So she's an amazing, I call her my mentor unofficially, because I just claimed her as my mentor. But she's an imposter syndrome expert, and I met her as I was kind of going through my journey of really trying to figure out how to navigate my imposter syndrome. And I remember the first time I met her in person was actually when she did her TEDx talk. I went out to go to see it because I have to meet this woman. She's fantastic. Everything that she talks about is resonating with me. And I wanted to hear her story in person. I wanted to see it. And I got a chance to, meet her after, and we've been friends since then. And, she was actually the person who linked me to do this TEDx talk. Like, she pushed me to do it. I was actually enrolled in her imposter syndrome group coaching course. And she said to me, they're doing it. They're calling for women to, talk about being fearless. And we think her and Rich thought I should do it. And I was just like, my imposter syndrome immediately kicked in. And I'm like, oh no, absolutely not. But I pushed myself to do it. And it was such a great accomplishment.
I had a guy on the podcast recently who looked at this in a different way, which I thought was really, really cool. And that is that you want to have imposter syndrome. And you want to have imposter syndrome because you know that that's when you're out there on the edge and you're pushing yourself and you're doing new things that are really going to help people. But you're not entirely comfortable with what you're doing. And his perspective on it was, if you don't feel like you have imposter syndrome, at least to some extent, then you're taking it too easy on yourself. You're being too comfortable, and ultimately you're not going to be happy with that. Now, there might be some people who would argue, no, I'd be quite happy with that. And so we're not talking to those people, because yes, I understand that. But there are a lot of people out there who do have dreams and ambitions and want to change the world. And it almost requires that. I think it might require that you have some imposter syndrome when you're going through that process, because it doesn't matter how much you've earned it. I mean, how could Steve Jobs walk out and be Steve Jobs? There's he didn't earn that in one sense, but in the other sense he did, because he went out and did all of the things that were required to make it happen. But there were many points along the way where he just had a dream and knew some of what he wanted to accomplish and brought in other people to help accomplish it. He couldn't do most of the things that got done under his leadership. And I wonder how, in his case, if he ever actually talked about this, if he felt at some point like, okay, at some point everybody's going to find me out. I'm just
No, it's so interesting that it's interesting that you say that, because that's something that I say to, my clients all the time, is like, if you're feeling too comfortable, if you're not feeling scared, if you're not feeling a little bit of fear, that means that you're actually not on the right path. Like, there is this concept of like comfort, and I definitely love to feel comfortable too in my fuzzy pajamas, but
Right.
in my life I don't want to always be feeling comfortable, because that just means that I'm not making the change. So I actually totally agree with that you want to feel like you're doing something a bit scary.
At some point, you wear your fuzzy pajamas for the first day, and your girlfriends are like, "Yeah, girl, you deserve that." You wear your
Yeah.
fuzzy pajamas for like the 40th day in a row, and they're like, "You're
Nah,
depressed."
you got it. Come on, let's go.
So yeah, there's got to be a certain level of pushing and a
Yeah.
certain amount of stress and challenge in life, I think, to keep us interested, to keep us engaged, and also so that we're giving at the level that we really should be.
I
I really
agree.
believe if there is a meaning to all of this, our time on this earth, it's to try to make it a better place, to leave it a little bit better than we found it. And if you subscribe to that at all, then I think you have to be uncomfortable a little bit to get there.
Oh, 100%. I think you have to be uncomfortable a lot to really be able to create change for yourself. There's that internal work, and then for the external world, yeah, I think we all have to get uncomfortable.
And those of you who are going through a PhD process, again, that's part of where the uncomfortable
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
going
Oh, it's very uncomfortable.
to be uncomfortable during that process. So don't think that you're alone in that feeling. Um, any other stories that you'd like to share with us today, Jasmine, about maybe some moment where you realize, we've been talking about imposter syndrome, some moment when you realize kind of that you've arrived. Did you ever feel one of those sort of things where
Mhm.
you were like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this, but then you also realize, but I deserve to be here?
Yeah, it didn't happen for me, till a little bit further along in my career. I think the imposter syndrome, I think being a first generation college student, a first generation graduate student, the first person in my family to actually have a manager position, at an organization, at a company, all of that really bred and like fed into my imposter syndrome. Also, being a Latina in STEM, like even though I was working for nonprofit organizations, I was still in research. So I was still sort of that brown girl in STEM. So it took me quite some time to say, like, I'm owning this. And it took me a lot of challenges, like things, having my PhD definitely opened a lot of doors, but I still am a Latina. So there were a lot of things that I had to overcome being in a very white male dominated space. And I think that's the way it is. So I would say that I felt like I had made it when I actually felt like I reclaimed myself. So there was a lot of conformity that I felt like I had to do, being a Latina in STEM, and I did it. And there were a lot of ways that I tried to appease others in order to achieve the success that I wanted, and I did it. And that caused a lot of internal struggle. So I would say that my aha moment and my moment of coming into my power was really when I reclaimed my identity and myself, and really stepped into the woman that I wanted to be in my career. And that took time. That took time because I kind of had to let go of a lot of these other things that are sort of external factors and do the internal work.
Yeah, that makes sense. So finish this sentence for me. My name is Jasmine Escalera, and I am.
My name is Jasmine Escalera, and I am a powerful career woman.
Okay. So you're identifying as female, but not Latina right off, and not as a doctor.
No.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah, no. I mean, I really, my power, I've always told individuals that, like, when I stepped into my power, I stepped back into my identity. But my identity is not my PhD. My identity is my community, where I came from, the fact that I was that girl from the projects. Like, that's, more of what I claim rather than in my PhD. My PhD has been a vehicle for me to be able to do amazing work, and for me to be able to really live a life where I can give back in a very unique way. Like, I think the work that I'm doing is giving back in a very, very unique way. And I love that. I love everything that my PhD has afforded me, the challenges and also the opportunity.
Yeah, and the opportunities, I think that's amazing. Where do you see those opportunities taking you next? Have you thought about what you think the next 1, 3, 5 years looks like?
Yeah, so I mean, because of the challenges I faced being, a Latina in STEM, I actually did a lot of journeying of myself, of internal work, but also really trying to figure out how to navigate best the career world, as a woman of color, just in general as a woman of color. So 2 years ago, I founded my own career coaching business where I use my leadership and my management experience, some of the challenges that I faced and overcame being a woman of color in my career. And so for me, the longevity, the where am I going next and the what am I doing next, I really want to focus on now helping women of color really to overcome their own challenges and barriers by doing the internal work, but also by building the skills and the confidence to really own their careers and to move around the career world in a way that is authentic to them, but also in a way that they'll be able to achieve and get the things that they want.
Yeah, I love that. I know that I personally made that decision to leave kind of corporate world at some point,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't feel like that was a really good fit for me. And so many of the folks that I like to hang out with now have all come to that decision that,
Yeah.
nothing for so many of us, nothing about the way that the corporate world is built is exactly built for us, whether it's whatever it might be. And
Yeah.
to be able to go out there and sort of make your own world, and help people in the way that you feel that you're most connected with, that you're most called to help with. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's amazing. That to me, that's the ultimate opportunity, is to
Yeah.
literally be able to write your story, and not say I want to plug into this story or that story, but this is my story, and I really enjoy that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's the way that we should all sort of navigate. It's like, what is my story and how do I create it for myself? I love that.
Oh, that's cool. I like the way you said that. That's great. Well, Jasmine, how can people reach out to you if they wanted to, you know, talk to you about the career path that you've had and how they
Mhm.
can, as you said, write their own story? How would they go about doing that?
Yeah, I love talking about my career path because I feel like it's been windy and all of that great stuff. But I'm very active on LinkedIn, so definitely connect with me there, Jasmine Escalera. And I'm also very active on Instagram. So if you ever have any questions or want to have a networking chat and talk about your journey, please just shoot me a message, and I'm always open to it.
So LinkedIn, Instagram, we will get that in the show notes. So those of you who'd like to check that out, you can go to dissertationdone.com/blog and find the episode notes there. Thank you so much for joining us here today. This has
Thank
been
you.
really fun. It's amazing how we hear the same sorts of things, whether I bring them up or not. The imposter syndrome, it's out there for everyone. The
Yep.
challenges that people face, and then the tremendous opportunities that are out there. I thank you so much for sharing all that with everyone.
Thank you so much. This was absolutely wonderful. I appreciate it. And I love the work that you're doing because you're absolutely right. I feel like when you know someone else has gone through it, it brings this sense of normal to it. And then you don't have to feel like you're doing it on your own.
It does. We actually had one of our early students, her dissertation research was on what types of support do you need if you're going to complete your dissertation remotely. So you're not plugged into a campus
Mm,
somewhere. And she found that you need obviously operational support, someone to tell you what to do and how to do it. But also you needed emotional support, people there
mm,
cheering you on that you can do it. And something that was a little bit surprising when we initially found it in the research, but makes all the sense in the world, is you also need to find people who've been there before and done it before.
mm.
If your husband or wife or mom or whoever it is that might be your cheerleader hasn't been through the process, at some point that their insistence that you can do it rings hollow. They literally don't know what they're talking about, and it becomes
Yeah.
frustrating for students that they're doubting themselves to have someone else believing in them and them not being able to believe in themselves. But if you've got someone
Yeah.
who's been there before and done it before, and they tell you that same story that you can do it, it carries more weight. So definitely find yourself wherever it is. We're happy to help students that are a good fit for us, but just find someone who you can get into your support network who has been through it before. You don't have to take a ton of their time, but they can share with you and talk to you from time to time and keep you on that path and keep you moving forward.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yes, it's been really good. I've really enjoyed it. I'd like to remind everyone that today's episode has been brought to you by Dissertation Done. So if you'd like to talk to us about any of the dissertation stuff that we've been talking about today, reach out to us at dissertationdone.com/done. And then something I'm super excited about is we've been doing a lot to help folks who are in that expert space to really get their message out there. We call it Expand Your Authority. And by becoming a published author, not only do you have the credibility of having a doctoral degree if you've done that, but also you've literally written the book on your area of expertise. You can find out how to interface with us about that by going to dissertationdone.com/book. Again, Dr. Escalera, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And to everyone else, have a great day and go out and live your unconventional life.
This has been An Unconventional Life. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe now to keep getting inspirational stories of unconventional lives as soon as they're released. Until then, go out and live your best unconventional life.